The massive courtroom fell silent as the defendant entered. Zarathek's towering form cast shadows across the polished floor, her forearms bound in energy shackles that hummed with deadly power. Standing nearly 12 feet tall, she belonged to the Vorthani species, apex predators whose reputation for violence had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Her scaled hide gleamed like midnight, marked with the ritual scars that showed her kill count, 347 confirmed deaths. Each scar told a story of brutal efficiency, of prey that never saw death coming. Her elongated skull housed a brain capable of tactical thinking that had outmaneuvered entire military units. Yellow eyes designed to track the slightest movement in complete darkness now scanned the courtroom with cold calculation. The judges sat high above on their platform, representing 12 different species from the Galactic Council. They had seen many criminals in their time, but never had they faced a Vorthani in their courtroom. Most of her kind never lived long enough to stand trial. They died fighting, as was their way. Prosecutor Veltash stepped forward, his crystalline form refracting the courtroom lights into dancing rainbows. His species, the Thyler, were known for their perfect memory and absolute dedication to justice. Today, he would use both traits to ensure this monster faced the ultimate penalty. Members of the council, Veltash began, his voice ringing with authority. We stand before a creature that embodies everything wrong with the galaxy. Zarathek of the Vorthani has spent her entire adult life hunting, killing, and destroying. Her victims span dozens of species across 47 star systems. The holographic displays around the courtroom flickered to life, showing crime scene after crime scene. Torn bodies, destroyed settlements, ships floating dead in space. The evidence painted a picture of systematic slaughter that made even the hardened judges shift uncomfortably in their seats. But today, Veltash continued, she stands accused of the most heinous crime possible under galactic law. She has committed treason against the very concept of civilization itself. Murmurs rippled through the packed gallery. Representatives from across the galaxy had come to witness this historic trial. Never before had a Vorthani been captured alive, and many believed this would set a precedent for dealing with their entire violent species. The defendant stands accused of collaborating with humans, Veltash announced, and the courtroom erupted into chaos. Humans. Even speaking the word sent chills through most galactic citizens. The newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel, they had appeared in known space only 50 years ago. What followed was a period of such rapid expansion and technological advancement that it defied all known patterns of species development. More terrifying than their technology was their nature. Where most species had evolved past their primitive aggressive instincts, humans seemed to embrace theirs. They formed emotional bonds with anything, their own kind, other species, even their machines and weapons. They named their ships, talked to their computers, and fought with a fury that made even the Vorthani seem cautious by comparison. But worst of all, humans didn't stay in their assigned territory. They wandered, explored, made friends with species that should have been their enemies, and somehow convinced others to join their cause. In 50 years, they had turned galactic politics upside down simply by refusing to follow the established order. Order! Chief Judge Krathmos hammered his gavel, his 6 arms creating a thunderous rhythm that silenced the crowd. The accused will be given fair trial according to galactic law, regardless of the nature of the charges. Zarathek remained motionless throughout the outburst, but her yellow eyes had found something in the crowd. In the back row, almost hidden behind a group of Altarian diplomats, sat 3 figures that didn't belong. They wore simple gray uniforms with no identifying marks, but their presence made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Humans, they had come for her. The first human was a woman with short brown hair and kind eyes that seemed completely out of place in a courtroom, filled with predators and politicians. Next to her sat a man whose massive frame rivaled even some Vorthani warriors, but who somehow managed to project calm instead of menace. The third was younger, barely out of adolescence by human standards, but his eyes held an intelligence that reminded Zarathek why she had made her choice. The prosecution will now present its opening arguments, Judge Krathmos announced. Veltash activated another series of holographic displays. This time they showed surveillance footage from the human colony world of New Terra. The images were grainy, taken from long distance, but they clearly showed Zarathek among human settlers. Not hunting them, not killing them, living with them. For the past 2 years, Veltash continued, the defendant has been residing illegally on New Terra, a human colony world. During this time, she has provided classified information about Vorthani military tactics to human forces. She has trained human soldiers in advanced combat techniques. Most damning of all, she has publicly renounced her allegiance to the Vorthani collective and declared herself a friend to humanity. The prosecutor paused, letting the weight of these accusations sink in. Across the galaxy, species had been fighting humans for territorial rights, trade agreements, and political influence. The idea that one of the most feared predator species would willingly share their secrets with humanity was almost unthinkable. The prosecution will prove, Veltash said, that the defendant's actions constitute high treason against the established galactic order. She has betrayed not only her own species, but every civilized race in the galaxy by empowering humanity's dangerous expansion. As the prosecutor spoke, Zarathek's mind wandered back to the events that had brought her here. 2 years ago, she had been a different creature entirely, a loyal soldier of the collective, following orders without question, viewing the galaxy through the simple lens of predator and prey. Then she had encountered humans for the first time, and everything changed. The memory was still vivid, a damaged human ship drifting in space, its crew trapped and dying. Standard procedure called for salvage and disposal of any survivors. Instead, she found herself facing creatures that refused to give up, that protected each other even when death was certain, that looked at her with curiosity instead of fear. They had changed her. Somehow, these impossible creatures had shown her what she could be beyond just a weapon. They had offered her something no other species ever had, a choice. Now she would pay the ultimate price for making it. Defense attorney Mirasol stood slowly, her graceful movements drawing every eye in the courtroom. As a member of the peaceful Zanari species, she seemed an unlikely choice to defend the galaxy's most feared predator. Her pale blue skin shimmered with the nervous patterns that betrayed her anxiety, but her voice remained steady. Honored judges, esteemed colleagues, she began, today we witness something unprecedented. For the first time in galactic history, we have the opportunity to hear directly from a Vorthani about their experiences, their motivations, and their capacity for change. Prosecutor Veltash scoffed audibly. The defense would have us believe that a creature capable of ripping apart starship hulls with her bare hands has suddenly developed a conscience. This is not a redemption story. It is a security threat of the highest magnitude. Mirasol ignored the interruption and activated her own holographic display. Instead of crime scenes, it showed something far more unsettling to the assembled crowd. Images of Zarathek working alongside humans. Not as their superior or their conqueror, but as their equal. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mirasol continued, I ask you to look beyond your preconceptions and examine the evidence with open minds. 2 years ago, my client encountered a human vessel in distress. By all accounts of her nature and training, she should have eliminated the survivors and claimed their technology. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The display shifted to show testimony from the human survivors. Captain Elena Vasquez, a weathered woman with graying hair and steady eyes, appeared in holographic form. I'll never forget that moment. Elena's recorded voice filled the courtroom. Our ship was dying, life support failing. We knew we were done for. Then this massive shadow appeared outside our viewport. We expected death, but instead she started cutting through our hull, not to get at us, but to save us. The courtroom stirred uneasily. Across the galaxy, first contact between humans and other species usually involved lengthy negotiations, careful protocols, and mutual wariness. The idea of immediate life-saving cooperation flew in the face of everything they understood about interspecies relations. My client didn't just rescue these humans, Mirasol explained. She transported them to the nearest safe harbor, ensured their medical needs were met, and asked for nothing in return. When questioned about her motives, her response was simple. It was the right thing to do. Judge Krathmos leaned forward, his massive frame creaking with the movement. Defense counsel, surely you don't expect this counsel to believe that a Vorthani suddenly developed altruistic tendencies. Their entire culture is built around the concept of might makes right. With respect, Your Honor, that's exactly what makes this case so significant, Mirasol replied. My client didn't just help humans once and disappear. She chose to learn about them, to understand what made them different. What she discovered changed her forever. The defense attorney activated another sequence of images, these showing daily life on New Terra. Unlike the sanitized diplomatic footage usually seen in galactic media, these recordings captured humans in their natural environment, children playing with dangerous-looking pets, families sharing meals with beings from dozens of different species, elderly humans teaching alien refugees how to operate human technology. Observe their behavior patterns, Mirasol instructed. Humans don't just coexist with other species, they actively seek to include them. They form what they call chosen families, with beings who have no genetic relation to them whatsoever. They risk their lives for strangers, sacrifice their own interests for abstract concepts like justice and freedom. In the gallery, the three human observers watched silently. The woman, Dr. Sarah Chen, gripped her companion's hand as the prosecutor prepared to respond. Major James Rodriguez squeezed back, his military training warring with his emotional investment in the trial's outcome. The youngest, Tommy Nakamura, barely 21 years old, stared at Zarathek with undisguised admiration. The prosecution objects to this character testimony about humans, Beltash interjected. The defendant's crimes are not mitigated by her victim's supposed virtues. But they're not her victims, Mirasol shot back. That's precisely the point. My client lived among humans for 2 years. She learned their languages, participated in their customs, even helped defend their colony from raider attacks. She became part of their community. A community that shouldn't exist. Beltash's composure cracked slightly. Human expansion violates 17 different territorial agreements. Their colonies are established in direct defiance of Galactic Council regulations. By helping them, the defendant enabled illegal activities that threaten the stability of our entire civilization. Chief Judge Krathmos called for order as murmurs swept through the courtroom. The human question had been a source of growing tension for years. Traditional powers found themselves unable to control or predict human behavior, leading to increasing calls for strict containment measures. Mirasol seized the moment. My client stands accused of treason for choosing cooperation over conflict. She's condemned for demonstrating that even the most predatory species can learn to value life over dominance. If that's treason, then perhaps we need to examine what we're truly defending. For the first time since the trial began, Zarathek spoke. Her voice was deep and resonant, carrying the authority of a natural-born leader. I request permission to address the court. The judges conferred quickly among themselves. Forthany rarely spoke in their own defense, preferring to die in silence rather than show weakness. This deviation from expected behavior made everyone uncomfortable. Permission granted, Judge Krathmos announced. The defendant may speak. Zarathek rose to her full height, energy shackles humming with increased power as the courtroom's security systems reacted to her movement. But instead of radiating menace, her posture conveyed something unexpected: dignity. Honored judges, I do not deny the charges against me. I chose to help humans. I chose to share knowledge with them. I chose to live among them as family rather than rule over them as prey. She paused, her yellow eyes scanning the faces of the judges, reading their expressions with predatory precision. But I reject the accusation of treason. I have not betrayed civilization. I have embraced it. For the first time in my life, I understood what it truly means to be part of something greater than yourself. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. Even the background hum of the building system seemed muted. You call humans dangerous because they expand rapidly and form alliances. You fear them because they refuse to accept the limitations you've placed on them. But I have seen what you refuse to acknowledge. They are not conquerors. They are builders. They don't seek to dominate the galaxy, they want to share it. In the gallery, Dr. Chen wiped tears from her eyes. This was exactly why they had come, despite the risks. Zarathek wasn't just defending herself. She was defending the idea that species could transcend their nature through choice and community. Tomorrow, Zarathek continued, you will likely sentence me to death for choosing love over fear. But my death will not stop what has already begun. Across the galaxy, members of every species are discovering what I discovered. Humans offer something we have never had before: the chance to become more than what we were born to be. The second day of testimony began with a parade of witnesses for the prosecution. Admiral Korvex of the Hegemony Navy took the stand first, his armored carapace gleaming under the courtroom lights. As one of the few military commanders to survive direct combat with Vorthani forces, his testimony carried enormous weight. I have fought Zarathek's people for 3 decades, Corvex testified, his mechanical voice translator struggling with the emotion in his natural speech. They are not like us. They do not understand mercy, compromise, or peaceful coexistence. They understand only strength and weakness, predator and prey. Prosecutor Veltash gestured to a tactical display showing battle formations. Admiral, in your professional opinion, what would happen if Vorthani military knowledge were to fall into human hands? Catastrophe, Corvex replied without hesitation. Human forces already fight with unprecedented aggression and adaptability. Give them Vorthani tactical doctrine, and they would become unstoppable. The balance of power that has maintained peace for centuries would collapse overnight. The next witness shocked everyone in the courtroom. Commander Theknal, a Vorthani military officer, entered under heavy guard. His species rarely appeared in public and never as witnesses in civilian courts. His presence meant the collective was taking this trial very seriously indeed. State your relationship to the defendant, Veltash instructed. Zarathek was under my command for 8 years, Theknal replied in the harsh, clipped tones of military Vorthani. She was an exemplary soldier, efficient, ruthless, completely dedicated to the collective's mission. And what was your reaction when you learned of her defection? Theknal's yellow eyes fixed on Zarathek with undisguised contempt. Betrayal of this magnitude is unprecedented in our history. She has violated every oath, abandoned every principle that defines our people. By collective law, she forfeited her right to exist the moment she chose aliens over her own kind. Defense attorney Mirasol stood for cross-examination. Commander Theknal, you said the defendant was exemplary. In all your years of service together, did she ever disobey orders or show signs of disloyalty? Never. Did she ever express dissatisfaction with collective doctrine or military objectives? Never. Then something significant must have happened to cause such a dramatic change in behavior. In your opinion, what could possibly motivate a loyal Vorthani soldier to abandon everything she had ever known? Theknal was silent for a long moment, his predatory features unreadable. There is no explanation that does not involve fundamental weakness of character. Or perhaps, Mirasol suggested, she discovered something worth more than blind obedience. Before Theknal could respond, chaos erupted in the courtroom. The main doors burst open as a squad of galactic security forces rushed in, their weapons drawn. Behind them strode Ambassador Keening, the Altarian diplomatic representative whose influence extended across dozens of star systems. This trial is suspended by emergency order of the Galactic Council, Keening announced, her crystalline voice cutting through the confusion. New intelligence has been received regarding human military activities. The defendant must be transferred to military custody immediately. Judge Krathmos rose from his bench, all 6 arms spread wide in a gesture of absolute authority. Ambassador Keening, this court operates under judicial mandate. No external authority can suspend proceedings without proper legal foundation. The legal foundation, Keening replied coldly, is Galactic Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha. Human forces have begun mobilizing across 17 sectors. Intelligence suggests they plan to rescue the defendant by force. A collective gasp ran through the courtroom. Military intervention in civilian judicial proceedings was almost unthinkable. If humans were willing to risk war over a single prisoner, it confirmed everyone's worst fears about their expansionist agenda. In the gallery, the 3 human observers exchanged worried glances. Dr. Chen activated a small communication device concealed in her sleeve, sending a coded message to contacts unknown. Major Rodriguez's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, before remembering where he was. Young Tommy simply stared at Zarathek, willing her to remain strong. Furthermore, Ambassador Keening continued, we have received disturbing reports from multiple sectors about humans attempting to recruit members of other species to their cause. This appears to be part of a coordinated campaign to destabilize galactic civilization. Defense attorney Mirasol stepped forward boldly. Your Honor, these accusations are unsubstantiated and clearly designed to prejudice the jury against my client. I move for immediate dismissal of all charges due to prosecutorial misconduct. Motion denied, Judge Krathmos replied, but his tone suggested deep concern about the developing situation. However, this court will not be intimidated by threats of military intervention. The trial will continue as scheduled. Ambassador Keening's expression hardened. Then you assume full responsibility for the consequences. When human ships arrive in this system, remember that you had the opportunity to prevent bloodshed. As the ambassador and her security detail withdrew, the courtroom remained in turmoil. Journalists activated emergency communication channels to file breaking news reports. Diplomatic observers huddled in urgent conversations with their home governments. The carefully controlled atmosphere of a civilized trial was rapidly deteriorating into something approaching panic. Order! Judge Krathmos hammered his gavel repeatedly. This court will maintain proper procedures regardless of external circumstances. The prosecution may continue with its case. Prosecutor Veltash seemed shaken by the dramatic interruption, but he pressed forward. Your Honor, in light of Ambassador Keening's testimony, the prosecution wishes to call an additional witness. Fleet Admiral Zoran will testify via secure holographic link from Galactic Defense Command. The courtroom's main display activated, revealing the imposing figure of the galaxy's highest-ranking military officer. Admiral Zoran belonged to the Korvaxi species, silicon-based beings whose natural armor made them ideal soldiers. His presence meant the military was taking direct interest in the trial's outcome. Admiral, Veltash began, what is your assessment of the current human threat level? Critical and escalating, Zoran replied without hesitation. Human forces are massing at strategic points throughout their territory. Our intelligence suggests they're preparing for a major offensive operation. In your professional opinion, does this military buildup relate to the defendant's situation? Absolutely. Humans form what they call emotional bonds with individuals outside their species. They appear willing to risk everything to prevent what they see as an injustice. Judge Krathmos leaned forward. Admiral, are you suggesting that humans would start a galactic war over a single prisoner? Your Honor, human psychology defies conventional military logic. They've demonstrated repeatedly that they'll fight impossible odds for abstract principles. If they believe the defendant is being treated unfairly, they may indeed resort to force. The implications hung heavy in the courtroom air. A species willing to wage war over moral principles was unprecedented in galactic history. Most civilizations understood that individual lives were acceptable losses in the pursuit of greater stability and order. Zarathek listened to the testimony with growing understanding. She had lived among humans long enough to recognize the pattern. They weren't preparing for conquest, they were preparing for rescue. The same protective instincts she had observed on New Terra were now manifesting on a galactic scale. Your Honor, she said, rising despite her shackles, I request permission to send a message to human forces. The request stunned everyone present. Criminals typically sought to avoid contact with outside forces during trial, not establish communication with them. Explain your reasoning, Judge Krathmos demanded. If humans are indeed mobilizing to rescue me, they're doing so based on incomplete information. I can prevent unnecessary bloodshed by clarifying the situation. Prosecutor Veltash objected immediately. The defendant seeks to coordinate with hostile forces. This is clearly an attempt to facilitate her own escape. On the contrary, Zarathek replied calmly, I seek to prevent the very war you claim to fear. Humans respond to honesty and direct communication. If I explain that I accept the consequences of my choices, they will stand down. Defense attorney Mirazal seized the opportunity. Your Honor, my client's offer demonstrates exactly the kind of moral reasoning that led to her transformation. She's willing to sacrifice her own chance of rescue to prevent others from being harmed. The judges conferred privately, their various communication methods creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and electromagnetic pulses. Finally, Chief Judge Krathmos announced their decision. The court will permit one brief communication under strict supervision. Any attempt to coordinate escape or military action will result in immediate termination of trial proceedings and summary execution. As technicians prepared the communication array, Zarathek closed her eyes and composed her thoughts. In a few moments, she would speak to the humans she had come to love as family. What she said next might determine not just her own fate, but the future of human galactic relations. The communication array crackled to life, and suddenly the courtroom was connected to the human fleet massing at the edge of the system. The main display showed the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the command deck, surrounded by a crew that represented the diversity of human space, multiple ethnicities, ages, and even a few non-human allies. Zarathek, Elena's voice carried across the light years with crystal clarity. "We're here. Just give us the word and we'll get you out of there." The assembled courtroom watched in fascination as the massive Vorthani predator's expression softened visibly. This was not the interaction between a criminal and her co-conspirators that they had expected. "Elena, my dear friend," Zarathek replied, her voice carrying emotions that most observers didn't think her species possessed. "You must not do this. Turn your ships around and return to human space." "Like hell we will," came another voice from the display. Major Rodriguez appeared next to Elena, his face set in determined lines. "You saved our lives, Zara. You became our family. We don't abandon family." Prosecutor Veltash watched this exchange with growing alarm. The easy familiarity between the defendant and these humans supported every accusation about dangerous emotional bonds and compromised loyalty. "You don't understand the situation," Zarathek continued. "I stand trial for my choices, and I accept whatever verdict is rendered. If you attack this station, you will only prove their worst fears about human aggression." A new voice joined the conversation. Young Tommy Nakamura, the human who had been observing from the gallery. He had somehow gained access to the communication channel. "Aunt Zara," he said, using the human term of endearment that made several judges recoil. "You taught me that family means never giving up on each other. You can't ask us to abandon that now." The casual use of familial terms between species sent shockwaves through the galactic observers. This wasn't political alliance or military cooperation. These beings genuinely considered each other family, despite having no genetic relationship whatsoever. Judge Krathmos intervened. "This communication has served its purpose. Terminate the connection immediately." "Wait," Zarathek called out. "There's something else they need to know." The judges hesitated. The defendant's cooperation so far had been exemplary, and her attempt to defuse the military situation had actually supported their authority rather than undermining it. "1 minute," Chief Judge Krathmos decided. "Then the connection ends." Zarathek looked directly into the communication array's sensors, her yellow eyes intense with emotion. "Elena, Jimmy, Tommy, all of you, I need you to listen carefully. What I'm about to say in this trial will shock you. You'll hear testimony about things I did before we met, crimes I committed, lives I took. Don't let it change how you remember our time together." "Nothing could change that," Elena replied firmly. "You're not the same person who committed those acts. We know who you really are." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," Zarathek said softly. "You see the good in me, but the galaxy sees only the monster. For us to have a future together, both truths must be acknowledged." The connection terminated, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. Even the most cynical observers had been moved by the obvious depth of affection between the defendant and her human friends. Defense attorney Mirasol seized the moment. "Your Honor, the court has just witnessed the exact phenomenon that transformed my client. Humans don't just form alliances. They create genuine emotional bonds that transcend species barriers. This connection is what motivated my client's change in behavior." "Or," Prosecutor Veltash countered, "we've seen evidence of sophisticated psychological manipulation. Humans have clearly exploited the defendant's isolation from her own kind to turn her against galactic civilization." "With the court's permission," Mirasol continued, "I would like to call character witnesses who can speak to my client's transformation." Judge Krathmos nodded reluctantly. "Proceed, but this court will not tolerate any further security breaches." The first witness surprised everyone. Dr. Yethmore, a healer from the pacifist Gentleni species, materialized via holographic projection. His people were known for their ability to sense emotional states and their absolute commitment to nonviolence. "Dr. Yethmore," Mirasol began, "you examined my client during her time on New Terra. What did you discover?" "I was initially terrified," the doctor admitted. "Vorthani are anathema to everything my people believe. But as I observed her interactions with the human colonists, I witnessed something unprecedented. Genuine emotional growth and moral development." "Can you elaborate?" The defendant exhibited clear signs of what humans call empathy. She formed protective bonds with individuals weaker than herself. Most remarkably, she demonstrated the ability to feel guilt about her past actions and actively work to make amends. Prosecutor Veltash objected. "Your Honor, this testimony is subjective interpretation, not scientific fact." "On the contrary," Dr. Yethmore replied, My people have studied emotional development across hundreds of species for thousands of years. What I observed in the defendant was transformation at the deepest psychological level. She had genuinely changed from a predator to a protector. The next witness was even more compelling. Admiral Sarah Chen, Dr. Chen's older sister and one of humanity's most respected military leaders, appeared via secure transmission from Human Defense Command. Admiral Chen, Mirasol addressed her. You were initially opposed to allowing Zarathek to remain on New Terra. What changed your mind? Evidence, Admiral Chen replied crisply. When the Karlix raiders attacked our outer settlements, Zarathek didn't just help defend the colonies. She put herself between human children and armed attackers. She took wounds that would have killed any of us to protect people she had known for less than a year. And your assessment of her military value to human forces? Admiral Chen's expression hardened. Counselor, I'll be frank with you. Zarathek could have provided intelligence that would give us decisive advantages in any conflict. She never once offered such information, and we never asked. Her value to us was never military. It was personal. This testimony struck at the heart of the prosecution's case. If humans weren't using Zarathek for military advantage, then the accusations of strategic collaboration fell apart. But Prosecutor Veltash wasn't finished. Admiral, regardless of your stated intentions, the defendant's presence among your people has had strategic implications. Her mere existence as a willing defector demonstrates to the galaxy that Vorthani can be turned against their own kind. You're absolutely right, Admiral Chen agreed, surprising everyone. Her example has shown us something we never imagined possible, that even the most predatory species can choose cooperation over conflict. If that threatens the galactic status quo, perhaps the status quo needs to be examined. The admission sent shockwaves through the courtroom. A high-ranking human military officer had just openly challenged the fundamental principles of galactic civilization. Ambassador Keening, who had remained in the courtroom despite the earlier confrontation, rose from her seat. Your Honor, this testimony proves exactly what we feared. Humans are using this defendant as a symbol to justify their expansionist agenda. Ambassador, Judge Krathmos replied carefully, you are not a party to these proceedings. Please resume your seat or leave the courtroom. I cannot stand by while the foundations of galactic order are attacked, Keening declared. This trial has become a platform for human propaganda. The tension in the courtroom reached a breaking point. Diplomatic immunity prevented the judges from removing Keening by force, but her interruptions threatened the integrity of the judicial process. Zarathek stood once again, her massive frame commanding attention despite the energy shackles. Your Honor, with permission, I would like to address Ambassador Keening directly. Absolutely not, Prosecutor Veltash objected. The defendant cannot be allowed to engage in political debate. This isn't political, Zarathek replied calmly. It's personal. Ambassador Keening fears what I represent because it challenges everything she believes about the nature of species and civilization. I understand that fear because I once shared it. Judge Krathmos considered carefully. The trial was already unprecedented in so many ways that one more deviation from standard procedure seemed insignificant. The defendant may speak, he decided, but this court will tolerate no disruption of the judicial process. Zarathek turned to face Ambassador Keening directly, her predatory features somehow conveying compassion rather than menace. Ambassador, you see chaos where I see possibility. You fear that accepting change will destroy everything you've worked to build. But I have lived among humans long enough to understand that change doesn't have to mean destruction. It can mean growth. The courtroom held its collective breath as two of the galaxy's most influential figures faced each other across philosophical differences that could reshape civilization itself. The third day of trial began with an unexpected development. Chief Judge Krathmos announced that the court had received a formal request from the Vorthani Collective to present additional testimony. Given the gravity of the charges and their implications for interspecies relations, the request had been granted. The witness who materialized via holographic projection was unlike any being the courtroom had seen before. Elder Sethkar was ancient even by Vorthani standards, her massive frame bearing the scars of countless battles spanning several centuries. As the supreme war leader of the collective, her word was absolute law among her people. I come before this court, Elder Sethkar began, her voice like grinding stone, to speak of shame and betrayal that cuts deeper than any wound, her yellow eyes fixed on Zarethek with a mixture of disappointment and rage that made several observers instinctively step back. Zarethek was more than a soldier, the elder continued. She was my chosen successor, trained from childhood to embody the highest ideals of our people. Her betrayal is not just political, it is personal. Prosecutor Veltash stepped forward respectfully. Elder Sethkar, can you explain to the court what Zarethek's defection means to your people? It means the corruption of everything sacred, the elder replied without hesitation. For a Vorthani to choose aliens over blood, weakness over strength, sentiment over duty, these are violations of natural law itself. She has become something that should not exist. The prosecution had clearly saved their most devastating witness for last. Elder Sethkar's testimony would carry enormous weight with the judges, most of whom came from cultures that valued tradition and hierarchy. In your opinion, Veltash continued, what message does Zarethek's continued existence send to other species? That the strong can be made weak through manipulation. That the natural order can be overturned by appealing to emotions that should not exist. Humans have weaponized compassion itself against the galaxy's most powerful predator. Defense attorney Mirazol rose for cross-examination, knowing that this witness could destroy any hope of saving her client's life. Elder Sethkar, you speak of natural law and tradition, but isn't it possible that your people's understanding of nature is incomplete? The elder's expression darkened dangerously. You dare question wisdom accumulated over millennia? I question whether wisdom that cannot grow is truly wise. Mirazol replied boldly. You've observed my client's transformation. Even if you disapprove of it, can you deny that it represents genuine psychological change? What I observe is weakness masquerading as growth. Zarethek has forgotten what she is. Or perhaps she's discovered what she could become. The philosophical debate that followed captivated the courtroom. Here was the fundamental question that had driven galactic politics for decades. Were species bound by their evolutionary nature, or could they transcend it through conscious choice? Elder Sethkar represented the traditional view, that biological imperatives defined social roles, that predators must remain predators, that attempting to change one's nature led only to chaos and suffering. Mirazol argued for the human perspective, that consciousness gave all beings the power to choose their own path, that evolution was not destiny, that cooperation could be as natural as competition. The defendant's transformation proves nothing except human skill at manipulation, Elder Sethkar declared. They have turned a perfect weapon into a confused creature that belongs to neither world. She belongs to the world she chose, Mirazol countered. A world where species work together instead of preying upon each other. Judge Krathmos called for order as tension filled the courtroom. The debate had moved far beyond the specifics of Zarethek's case into questions that could reshape galactic civilization. Elder Sethkar, the chief judge addressed the witness. What would be the consequences if this court were to acquit the defendant? War, the elder replied simply. The collective cannot tolerate this precedent. If aliens can turn our people against us, then aliens become our enemies. The threat hung in the air like a blade. The Vorthani collective possessed military power that could devastate entire sectors. Their entry into active conflict would destabilize the entire galaxy. And if the court renders a guilty verdict? Judge Krathmos continued, justice will be served. The natural order will be preserved. Other species will understand the consequences of interfering with Vorthani loyalty. As Elder Sethkar's projection faded, the courtroom erupted in urgent conversations. The judges had been presented with an impossible choice: acquit Zarethek and face war with the collective, or execute her and potentially trigger human military intervention. Prosecutor Veltash used the confusion to present his closing arguments. Members of the jury, the choice before you is clear. The defendant stands at the center of a conflict that threatens galactic stability. Her actions have created a crisis that can only be resolved through decisive action. He activated a final holographic display showing star charts marked with human expansion patterns, Vorthani military positions, and potential conflict zones. If you allow sentiment to override law, if you permit individual feelings to supersede collective security, you will have chosen chaos over order. The defendant may have been manipulated by human psychological warfare, but that does not diminish the threat she represents. Defense attorney Mirazol rose for her closing argument, knowing that her client's life hung in the balance. Honorable judges, we stand at a crossroads. The easy path is to sacrifice one life to maintain the status quo, but I ask you to consider what we lose if we make that choice. She gestured toward Zarathek, who sat with quiet dignity despite the circumstances. My client represents proof that beings can transcend their nature through conscious choice. She embodies the possibility that species can evolve beyond their biological imperatives to become something better. If we execute her, we're not just ending one life, we're killing hope itself. Mirasol's voice gained strength as she continued. Yes, change is frightening. Yes, it challenges established order, but the alternative is stagnation. A galaxy frozen in ancient patterns of conflict and mistrust. She turned to address the judges directly. You have the power to choose between fear and hope, between the old ways and new possibilities. The defendant doesn't ask for mercy. She asks for the right to exist as proof that transformation is possible. The closing arguments complete. Chief Judge Krathmos announced that the court would recess for deliberation. As the judges filed out, Zarathek was returned to her holding cell under heavy guard. In the corridor outside the courtroom, the three human observers finally had a chance to speak privately. Dr. Sarah Chen struggled with emotions she hadn't expected to feel. I've known her for 2 years, she whispered to her companions. I've seen her play with children, comfort the grieving, risk her life for strangers. How can they possibly condemn her to death for choosing love over violence? Major Rodriguez placed a protective hand on her shoulder. Because they're afraid, Doc. They've built their entire civilization on the idea that nature is fixed, that change is dangerous. Sarah proves them wrong and they can't handle it. Young Tommy Nakamura stared through the reinforced windows toward the detention area. She's going to die, isn't she? And there's nothing we can do to stop it. Maybe, Rodriguez admitted, but her sacrifice won't be meaningless. She's shown the galaxy that change is possible. Eventually, that idea will spread. Eventually isn't good enough, Tommy declared with the passionate certainty of youth. She deserves to live to see the world she helped create. Unknown to the humans, their conversation was being monitored by galactic security. Every word they spoke was being analyzed for signs of conspiracy or planned intervention. But instead of finding evidence of military plotting, the surveillance team discovered something far more dangerous: genuine grief and love that transcended species boundaries. In her cell, Zarathek meditated on the events of the past 3 days. She had told her truth, defended her choices, and faced the consequences with dignity. Whatever verdict the judges reached, she had accomplished what she set out to do. She had shown the galaxy that transformation was possible. The only question now was whether that would be enough to change anything, or if her death would simply reinforce the fears that had brought her to trial in the first place. The jury deliberation lasted 18 hours, but for those waiting outside the courtroom it felt like an eternity. News of the trial had spread across the galaxy, and billions of beings watched the proceedings through various media outlets. Protests had erupted on dozens of worlds as different species chose sides in what had become more than just a criminal case. On human worlds, crowds gathered in public spaces to hold vigils for Zarathek. Children who had never met her held handmade signs declaring her their friend. Veterans spoke passionately about the Vorthani warrior who had chosen peace over violence. On traditional worlds, different scenes played out. Citizens demanded harsh justice for the traitor who threatened galactic stability. Military leaders called for preemptive strikes against human territory to prevent future contamination of their species. In the courtroom, tension reached a breaking point when the judges returned. Chief Judge Krathmos looked older than when deliberations began, the weight of his decision etched deep in his alien features. The jury has reached a verdict, he announced, his voice carrying across the packed gallery. The defendant will rise. Zarathek stood with quiet dignity, her energy shackles humming as the courtroom security systems tracked her every movement. Around her, friends and enemies held their breath. Zarathek of the Vorthani, Judge Krathmos continued, this court finds you guilty of all charges. You have betrayed your species, violated galactic law, and endangered the stability of interstellar civilization. Gasps and cries erupted from the human observers. Dr. Chen buried her face in her hands while Major Rodriguez cursed under his breath. Young Tommy simply stared at his adopted aunt with tears streaming down his face. However, the judge continued, and the single word silenced the entire courtroom. This jury recognizes that your crimes were motivated by genuine moral conviction, rather than malicious intent. We acknowledge the testimony regarding your transformation and the positive impact of your choices on human-galactic relations. Prosecutor Veltash leaned forward eagerly, certain that victory was within his grasp. Defense attorney Mirazal gripped her client's massive hand, preparing for the worst. Therefore, Chief Judge Krathmos announced, this court sentences you to exile from galactic space for a period of 50 standard years, with the possibility of review after 25 years contingent upon continued good behavior. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Exile was virtually unprecedented in galactic law, reserved for cases where execution was legally justified but morally questionable. It meant Zarathek would be banished to the Outer Rim territories beyond council jurisdiction, effectively sentenced to live among humans permanently. Prosecutor Veltash shot to his feet. Your Honor, this sentence is insufficient. The defendant's crimes demand ultimate punishment. The prosecution is overruled, Judge Krathmos replied firmly. This court has rendered its verdict according to law and conscience. Elder Sethkar's holographic projection reappeared without authorization, her ancient features twisted with rage. This mockery of justice will not stand. The collective will not recognize this court's authority. The collective is welcome to pursue diplomatic channels if they disagree with our decision, the Chief Judge replied calmly. But this court's jurisdiction is absolute within council space. Ambassador Keening rose from her seat, her crystalline form refracting angry light patterns. This verdict sets a dangerous precedent. Every species with territorial disputes will cite this case to justify their expansion. Ambassador, Judge Krathmos addressed her directly. The court notes your concerns for the record. However, we must rule based on law and evidence, not political convenience. In the gallery, the three human observers embraced each other with relief and joy. Their friend would live, albeit in permanent exile from her birth species. For beings who valued individual choice over tribal loyalty, it seemed like the best possible outcome. But the celebration was premature. Elder Sethkar's projection remained active despite official dismissal. If the collective cannot find justice in galactic courts, she declared, we will seek it through other means. The human contamination of our people cannot be allowed to spread. The threat was unmistakable. The Vorthani collective was preparing for war. Chief Judge Krathmos hammered his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. This court will not be intimidated by threats of violence. The sentence stands as rendered. But even as he spoke, emergency alerts began flashing on communication panels throughout the courtroom. Fleet movements were being detected across multiple sectors as various species prepared for potential conflict. Zarathek stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. Your Honor, I request permission to make a final statement. The judge hesitated, then nodded. At this point, additional disruption seemed impossible. Fellow beings of all species, Zarathek began, her words being broadcast across the galaxy. I accept this court's verdict with gratitude. I have been given something more precious than life itself, the opportunity to continue choosing who I want to be. She turned to address Elder Sethkar's projection directly. My former leader, I understand your anger. I was raised to believe that strength meant dominance, that survival required the destruction of the weak. But I have learned that true strength lies in protecting others, that survival means ensuring everyone has a chance to thrive. The elder's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in her ancient eyes. To the humans watching, Zarathek continued, do not let my exile become a source of conflict. The galaxy has seen that change is possible. That knowledge cannot be destroyed by violence. She faced the camera arrays that were carrying her image across known space. To all species I offer this message. You are not bound by what evolution made you. You can choose to be more than your nature dictates. You can choose love over fear, cooperation over competition, growth over stagnation. The courtroom fell absolutely silent as her words resonated across countless worlds. I will spend my exile working to build bridges between species, to show that differences can be strengths rather than sources of conflict. If my example saves even one life, if it prevents even one war, then everything I've sacrificed will have been worthwhile. As the trial concluded, beings across the galaxy processed what they had witnessed. A member of the most feared predator species had chosen love over violence and accepted exile, rather than renounce her convictions. The implications would reshape diplomatic relations for generations to come. But first, they would have to survive the immediate aftermath. Even as Zarathek was processed for transfer to exile, military forces were mobilizing across multiple sectors. The Vorthani collective was preparing to reclaim their wayward daughter by force, while human fleets moved to protect their adopted family member. What had begun as a single criminal trial was about to become the flashpoint for the largest interstellar conflict in galactic history. The question was no longer whether Zarathek would survive her sentence, but whether galactic civilization itself would survive the forces her transformation had unleashed. In her final moments in council custody, Zarathek reflected on the path that had brought her to this point. 2 years ago, she had been a perfect weapon in service of an ancient creed. Now she was something entirely new. A bridge between worlds, a symbol of possibility, a living proof that even the most fundamental aspects of nature could be transcended through conscious choice. Tomorrow, she would begin her exile among the humans she had chosen as family, but tonight the galaxy held its breath and prepared for war. 5 years had passed since the trial that shook galactic civilization to its core. The predicted war between species never came, but something far more profound had taken its place. A quiet revolution that spread across the stars like ripples in a cosmic pond. Zarathek stood on the observation deck of New Terra's orbital station, watching ships from dozens of species dock peacefully in the same facility. Humans, Altarians, Zanari, Thyler, and even a few young Vorthani moved through the corridors together, working side by side on projects that would have been impossible just years before. "The morning reports are in," Dr. Sarah Chen announced as she joined her friend at the viewport. Now serving as Director of Interspecies Relations for the human colonies, she carried data tablets filled with updates from across human space. "Let me guess," Zarathek replied with amusement. "Another 3 colonies have declared themselves sanctuary worlds for species-seeking transformation?" 4, actually, Sarah laughed. "And the Hegemony Council is losing their minds about it. Ambassador Keening sent another formal protest demanding we stop corrupting their citizens." Through the transparent aluminum, they could see a remarkable sight. A Korvaxi warrior teaching human children traditional fighting forms, while their parents learned advanced metallurgy from the warrior's mate. Such scenes had become commonplace in human space, as beings from restrictive cultures sought refuge among people who valued individual choice over social conformity. "Any word from the collective?" Zarathek asked, though she asked the same question every morning. "Radio silence as usual," Sarah replied. "But our intelligence sources suggest growing unrest among younger Vorthani. Your trial recordings are being passed secretly through their networks. The transformation hadn't been immediate or universal. Most species still maintained their traditional structures and beliefs. But cracks had appeared in the foundations of galactic orthodoxy. And through those cracks, new possibilities grew. The communications panel chimed with an incoming priority message. Tommy Nakamura's face appeared on screen, now 26 and serving as humanity's youngest ambassador to the Galactic Council. "Aunt Zara." "Sarah?" He greeted them with the warm familiarity that still shocked older diplomats. "I've got news you need to hear." "Good news or bad news?" Sarah asked. "Both," Tommy grinned. "The bad news is that the Hegemony has filed another motion to have Zara's exile extended indefinitely. The good news is that 17 species have filed counter-motions supporting her request for sentence review." Zarathek's expression remained neutral, but Sarah could see the hope flickering in her yellow eyes. After 5 years of exile, her friend still dreamed of the day when she might be allowed to travel freely throughout galactic space. "There's more," Tommy continued. 3 Vorthani ships were detected at the edge of the system yesterday. They're not displaying collective military codes. This was genuinely surprising. Since the trial, the collective had maintained absolute prohibition on contact with human space. Any Vorthani found in association with humans faced immediate execution upon return. "Should we be worried?" Sarah asked. "I don't think so," Tommy replied. "Their communications suggest they're seeking asylum. Apparently word about our family integration programs has reached some very interesting ears. The family integration programs had been Zarathek's idea, a systematic approach to helping refugees from rigid societies adapt to human cultural norms. What made the programs unique was their emphasis on emotional healing alongside practical skills. Beings who had spent their lives suppressing natural empathy learned to process and express feelings they didn't know they possessed. I'll handle the Vorthani arrivals personally, Zarathek decided. They'll need to understand what they're choosing before they make it permanent. As Tommy's transmission ended, Sarah noticed her friend's thoughtful expression. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about something Elder Sethkar said during the trial," Zarathek replied. "She called me something that should not exist. At the time I thought she meant it as condemnation. And now? Now I wonder if she was simply stating a fact. I shouldn't exist according to the old rules, the old understanding of what's possible. But here I am, proof that the rules can change." Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert. The main display activated to show Major Rodriguez, now serving as commander of New Terra's defense forces, broadcasting from the system's perimeter. "We've got an unscheduled arrival," Rodriguez announced. "Single ship Galactic Council markings. They're requesting immediate permission to dock and meet with Zarathek." This was unprecedented. No official council representative had visited human space since the trial. The political implications of such a meeting could reshape interstellar relations. "Identify the ship," Sarah ordered. "That's the interesting part," Rodriguez replied. "It's a judicial courier vessel. The only passengers are Chief Judge Krathmos and a small diplomatic staff." Zarathek and Sarah exchanged glances. The chief judge traveling personally to meet with an exiled criminal suggested developments of enormous significance. 2 hours later, they sat in New Terra's main conference room facing the massive Korvaxi judge who had sentenced Zarathek to exile. Age had not diminished Krathmos's imposing presence, but something in his manner suggested profound changes had occurred since their last meeting. "Zarathek," the judge began formally, "I have traveled here at considerable personal and political risk to discuss your case. I'm honored by your visit, Your Honor," Zarathek replied with genuine respect, though I confess surprise at the timing. "The timing is not coincidental," Krathmos explained. "The Galactic Council faces a crisis that your situation helped create. Traditional power structures are breaking down as more species embrace what they call the human example." He activated a holographic display showing political maps of known space. Entire sectors now showed mixed species governance, integrated colonies, and alliance structures that crossed traditional boundaries. 17 systems have declared independence from their founding species to form multicultural federations, the judge continued. Trade networks are being restructured around cooperation rather than competition. Even military alliances are shifting toward mutual defense rather than territorial control. Sarah leaned forward. "Your Honor, are you suggesting that Zarathek's transformation has catalyzed galaxy-wide social change?" "I'm not suggesting it," Krathmos replied grimly. "I'm stating it as established fact. The question is what we do about it." Zarathek studied the judge's expression carefully. "You didn't come here to extend my exile or impose additional restrictions. You came here because you need something." "Perceptive as always," Krathmos acknowledged. "The Council faces a choice between adapting to these changes or attempting to suppress them through force. The traditional powers favor suppression, but the practical cost would be catastrophic." He manipulated the holographic display to show military deployment scenarios. Conservative estimates suggest that enforcing pre-transformation boundaries would require a galactic war involving at least 40% of all known species. The destruction would set civilization back centuries. "So you want me to help prevent this war?" Zarathek asked. "I want you to help win it," the judge replied, surprising everyone in the room. "But not through violence. Through demonstration that peaceful coexistence is not only possible, but preferable to the alternatives." The proposal that followed was breathtaking in scope. The Galactic Council was prepared to offer Zarathek full restoration of her citizenship and a formal position as Special Ambassador for Interspecies Integration. Her role would be to travel throughout known space, helping species navigate the transition from traditional isolation to cooperative coexistence. The position would be dangerous, Krathmos warned. Conservative elements in every species would view you as a threat to their power structures. You would face constant assassination attempts and political sabotage. "And if I refuse?" Zarathek asked. "Then the galaxy will tear itself apart fighting over questions that your example has already answered. Millions will die in wars that could be prevented by proving that transformation is possible." Zarathek was quiet for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what was being offered. Full restoration meant she could visit her homeworld again, could face the collective as an equal rather than an exile. But it also meant leaving the safety and acceptance she had found among humans to venture into hostile territory, where her very existence challenged fundamental beliefs. "I accept," she said finally, "on one condition. Name it. I don't work alone. Humans taught me that transformation happens through community, not individual heroism. I want a mixed species team of ambassadors, each representing successful integration experiences." Judge Krathmos smiled for the first time since arriving. "I had hoped you would say that. The Council has already approved a 12-member diplomatic corps drawn from species across the galaxy. They're all waiting to meet their new commander." As the meeting concluded and arrangements were made for Zarathek's new position, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 5 years ago, she had been sentenced to exile for choosing love over hatred. Now she was being asked to help reshape galactic civilization based on those same principles. The work ahead would be